Welcome, everyone, to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time, Pickett joined the Confederacy and quickly rose up to the rank of Major General. Now we take a look at his most iconic moment, the Battle of Gettysburg. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. Pickett wouldn't get to stay near his sweetheart Sally for long. At the end of April and the 1st of May, his corps commander James Longstreet was ordered to bring his two divisions back to Northern Virginia to join Robert E. Lee in the army. Although he hadn't captured Suffolk like he had hoped, Longstreet's occupation of the area garnered a great amount of food for the army. Pickett and the rest of Longstreet's corps arrived too late to take part in the Battle of Chancellorsville, which resulted in the wounding of Thomas Stonewall Jackson. Although John Bell Hood's division in Longstreet would quickly move to Lee's support, Pickett and his troops stayed behind, moving around Richmond, keeping an eye out for a Union threat against the capital. He maneuvered around that part of Virginia for more than a month before receiving word to fix 3 days' rations, but no route was mentioned. Lee sent a message to Pickett to forward wagons to Newton, but when Pickett couldn't find the location on any of his maps, he telegraphed Lee asking him to clarify where he meant, but he got no reply. Frustrated, he wrote to Brigadier General Arnold Elzey in Richmond that he had telegraphed immediately to find out what place was meant. As usual from those headquarters, received no reply. Pickett and his men were at Hanover Junction when some Union raiders threatened King William County. Pickett was ordered to deal with the threat, but the enemy slipped away. Lee got angry at Pickett. He wrote to one of his new corps commanders, A.P. Hill, "I feel Pickett did not go far enough. I have telegraphed him that he must drive them back." As Lee assembled his army for his second invasion of the North, Pickett traveled northward, but 2 brigades less. His brigade of South Carolinians and a brigade of Virginians were left behind or detached. All he had with him was the brigades of James Kemper, Richard Garnett, and Lewis Armistead. He worried about the strength of his command, writing to his superiors that he now commanded the smallest division in the army and requesting for his brigades to be sent to him, but to no avail. In the summer of 1863, Pickett was 38 years old. To white Southern men, Pickett seemed a strange mix of femininity and masculinity, a dandy in uniform. Staff Officer Moxley Sorrell offered a typical description: a medium-sized, well-built man, straight, erect, and in well-fitting uniform, an elegant riding whip in his hand. His appearance was distinguished. But Sorrell added, it was Pickett's hair that made him memorable. Long ringlets flowed loosely over his shoulders, Sorrell wrote, trimmed and highly perfumed. His beard likewise was curling and giving out the sense of Araby. Another member of Longstreet's staff, Raphael Moses, recalled Pickett as dashing, yet foppish in his dress, a man who wore his hair in long ringlets. Arthur Freemantle, an English visitor with Lee's army, similarly observed, he wears his hair in long ringlets and is altogether a desperate-looking character. By June 30th, Pickett was near Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. He put his men to work destroying railroad infrastructure. In the early morning hours of July 2nd, messages from Lee got to Pickett instructing him to proceed to Gettysburg. The previous day a battle had erupted, and now Lee wanted his entire army concentrated around the little Pennsylvania town. He didn't arrive in time to take part in the vicious fighting on the second day of the battle, but Longstreet assured him that he would have plenty of work for him the next day. The morning of July 3rd was one of excitement for Pickett, who could barely contain himself. Lee decided to strike at the center of the Union line on Cemetery Ridge, following an artillery barrage of around 150 cannons that began around 1 p.m. The infantry attack would consist of Pickett's division and 2 divisions from A.P. Hill's corps. Hearing of the battle from his position at Chambersburg the previous day, Pickett thought he would miss out on another fight and another opportunity to gain fame, but the thrill of the attack on this now 3rd day of the battle excited him. Cavalry General Fitzhugh Lee remembered Pickett riding past him saying, "Come on, Fitz, and go with us. We shall have lots of fun there presently." Longstreet ordered Edward Porter Alexander, the commander of the artillery that was to soften up the Union position, to begin the bombardment until the enemy appeared weakened or demoralized. When that moment arrives, Longstreet wrote, advise General Pickett and of course advance such artillery as you can use in aiding the attack. Pickett knew nothing of this exchange. As Union cannon fire loudly answered the roaring guns of the Confederates, he continued to feel confident and sure of victory. At one point, Alexander went to Pickett to feel his pulse, as it were, about the assault. Alexander later recorded, "He was in excellent spirits and sanguine of success. Around 1:30 p.m. it appeared that Union gunfire had measurably slackened. Alexander even spied Federals wheeling the guns to the rear. He immediately dispatched to Pickett, 'If you are to advance at all, you must come at once, or we will not be able to support you as we ought.' For a passing moment, Pickett's feelings of confidence left him, and the old uncertainties reappeared. Using precious time, he rode with Alexander's note to Longstreet. His friend and commander read the note without a word. Pickett scanned Longstreet's face, looking for signs of encouragement or reassurance. Seconds ticked by. Pickett asked, 'General, shall I advance?' Longstreet could not speak. He nodded and turned his head so as to avoid Pickett's eyes. Pickett stiffly straightened and saluted. 'I am going to move forward, sir.' The veil of pride and cockiness returned. Pickett mounted his horse and rode toward his division. A few minutes later, another note came from Alexander. 'For God's sake, come quick, or we cannot support you. Ammunition nearly out.' Pickett rode to his division, straight up in his saddle, took off his hat and yelled to his men, 'Up, men, to your posts! Don't forget that you are from old Virginia.' Then he yelled out the preparatory command, 'Forward.' The orders echoed throughout the ranks of his 3 brigades, and they stepped off. It was about 3 p.m. Pickett, as a division commander should do, led his battle line toward the enemy, but as division commanders were expected to do, he stopped about 400 yards from the enemy, let his men pass, then monitored his battle line, riding from right to left. He stayed close to the Cadore barn for a while as the chaos reigned over the battlefield. Reports that Pickett shirked his duties or hid behind a tree are false. He did as any major general in combat would do. While his men attacked, he sent one of his aides to Longstreet, asking for support. The corps commander believed the attack hopeless, but dispatched a brigade under Cadmus Wilcox to Pickett's right, toward the Virginians' position. Pickett sent repeated couriers to Wilcox, urging him to bring up his brigade. Captain Robert Bright then brought it to Pickett's attention that the left flank seemed to be in trouble, and Pickett told Bright, 'Ride to Deering's battalion. They have orders to follow up the charge and keep their caissons filled. Order them to open with every gun and break that column and keep it broken.' As the minutes ticked by, Pickett's men were slain, waiting for artillery and infantry support. Pickett's division melted away before his eyes. An artillery officer named William Pogue encountered Pickett soon after the repulse. He rode toward Pickett and said, 'General, my orders are that as soon as our troops get the hill, I am to move as rapidly as possible to their support. But I don't like the looks of things up there.' Pickett didn't say a word, just stared at the battle-torn field. Pogue persisted, 'What do you think I ought to do under the circumstances? Our men are leaving the hill.' Pickett finally spoke, saying, 'I think you had better save your guns.' Then he rode away. Longstreet then came to Pickett, where the division commander exclaimed, 'General, I am ruined. My division is gone. It is destroyed.' Longstreet attempted to console him and tell him that everything would be right again. Next, General Lee approached Pickett. The distraught Pickett said, 'General Lee, I have no division now. Armistead is down, Garnett is down, Kemper is mortally wounded.' Lee responded, 'Come, General Pickett, this has been my fight, and upon my shoulders rests the blame.' Lee didn't renew the attack and ordered the army to march back into Virginia. After the disastrous defeat in what became known forever as Pickett's Charge, they were relegated to escorting prisoners. Pickett felt it a humiliation to subject his men to such duty after what they had done on July 3rd, and took his complaint to Lee. 'No one grieves more than I at the loss suffered by your noble division in the recent conflict, or honors it more for its bravery and gallantry,' and that he regretted assigning them the task but to do his duty. In Pickett's formal report, he heavily criticized other officers and bemoaned what he and his men endured. It was so defamatory that Lee allegedly made him destroy the report, saying, 'We have the enemy to fight and must carefully at this critical moment guard against dissensions which the reflections in the report would create.' Sally received a bundle of letters in mid-July. Pickett wailed about the travesty befallen his division, writing, 'If the charge made by my gallant Virginians on the fatal 3rd day of July had been supported, or even if my other 2 brigades had been with me, we would have been in Washington and the war ended. The animosity between Pickett and Lee was growing. Sally recalled that after Gettysburg, Pickett told her, "The future is uncertain, and it is impossible for me to call a moment my own. Again, with all the graves I have left behind me, and with all the wretchedness and misery this fated campaign has made, we would not wish anything but a very silent, very quiet wedding, planning on the sacrament and blessing of the church, and after that, back to my division and to the blessing of those few of them who by God's miracle were left." The two wanted to get married as soon as possible, and the date was set for September 15, 1863, in Petersburg, Virginia. However, since none of them were residents of the city, they needed a special court decree. They got married in St. Paul's Episcopal Church, with a crowd of thousands cheering them after the event. According to Sally, they then went to Richmond by train to a reception where President Jefferson Davis and his wife Verena attended. Robert E. Lee's wife gave the Picketts a fruitcake. After the wedding, Pickett was assigned to command what would become the Department of Southern Virginia and North Carolina, with his headquarters at Petersburg. As a departmental commander, his troops were repeatedly taken from him and distributed to other departments and armies. At the end of 1863, Pickett received reports that Union forces were moving into his department, freeing slaves and enlisting black men into the army, using those new troops to combat Confederate forces. Another report came in that Union Brigadier General Edward Wild took 2 women hostage and put them in irons as retribution for the Confederates holding a black Union soldier. To combat this problem, Pickett issued an order to hang anyone caught burning houses or mistreating women. The raids continued in an attempt to stop irregular warfare by guerrillas. Wild decided to make an example out of one of the captured Confederates. Private Daniel Bright, although he was an enlisted member of the Georgia Cavalry, Wild executed him and left him hanging from a post. Pickett got reports of the atrocity and wrote, "It makes my blood boil to think of these enormities being practiced, and we have no way of arresting them." A week after Bright's execution, Union citizens of Pasquotank County, North Carolina, told federal officials they found the body of a black Union soldier hanged, with a wooden placard around his neck. The placard read, "Here hangs Private Samuel Jones of Company B, 5th Ohio Regiment, by order of Major General Pickett, in retaliation of Private Daniel Bright, Company L, 62nd Georgia Regiment, hung December 18, 1863, by order of Brigadier General Wild." Pickett soon got word that he was to attack and capture New Bern, North Carolina, a town that fell to Union hands in early 1862 during Ambrose Burnside's North Carolina expedition. Pickett assembled 13,000 troops and 14 ships in late January for the assault. He planned for a 4-pronged attack against the fortified town. However, some of his officers, Seth Barton in particular, was slow to move at the appointed time because he was convinced the enemy heavily outnumbered him. After 2 days of trying to prod his men to fight, the element of surprise was lost, and he decided to withdraw his troops altogether. George Pickett's actions and words over the next several weeks seemed to show a man on the edge of despair. Little in this war had gone the way he planned. These battles were not the sort of honorable fighting he had envisioned as a young cadet at West Point, nor what he experienced as a hero in Mexico. Rather than offering affirmation, this war brought personal attacks on his manhood, strained relations with his superiors, and seemingly senseless death and destruction. Simple frontal assaults did not succeed, and the enemy ignored rules of war. An outlet for his frustration came soon after his inglorious retreat from New Bern. On the New Bern expedition, Pickett received 22 North Carolinians as prisoners. Those 22 men had been a part of the North Carolina State Guard, but when they were threatened to be drafted into Confederate service, they joined the Union. Pickett viewed them as deserters, hanging all 22 of them after they were court-martialed. Union General John Peck reached out to Pickett about conducting themselves by the rules of war and informing him of Abraham Lincoln's proclamation that the Confederates should treat the captured black soldiers as any white soldiers. Peck also asked about Pickett's responsibility in the hanging of the black soldier named Samuel Jones. Pickett denied any part in the hanging, but coldly responded that if he had caught any black soldier who had killed an officer, soldier, or citizen of the Confederate States, that he would have executed him immediately. Pickett then added that for every Confederate soldier hanged, he would hang 10 U.S. soldiers. After the expedition, an uptick in Union raids caused concern for the Confederate War Department. Braxton Bragg, the new military advisor to President Davis, requested that Pickett stay vigilant and to keep him informed of all movements of the enemy. Pickett took this literally and began sending him every report that came across his desk, whether it had any validity or not. The influx of papers became so great that Bragg wrote back, "I must warn you of the evil resulting from exaggerated and unreliable reports." By April 23, 1864, the Confederacy replaced Pickett with Pierre-Gustave Toutant-Beauregard as departmental commander. Pickett still remained in Petersburg, being the district commander for the town. The once proud division commander now pleaded to be transferred back to the Army of Northern Virginia. It was granted, but Beauregard came down with an illness and turned command back over to Pickett, the very same day that Union forces, constituting the Army of the James around 30,000 men, began moving toward the capital. Seeing the movement of Federal boats and troops, Pickett fired off numerous telegrams to Richmond on May 5th, but no response came. It appears that Pickett was the boy who cried wolf. He had written so many messages about the movement of Union soldiers that now he wasn't believed. He finally sent a message reading, "I have sent you numerous telegrams this morning and failed to obtain an answer. The emergency is so great that I sent a courier by train to say that the enemy in force are coming up the river. You had better send troops." Bragg took the telegram, scribbled the word "seen" on it, and filed it away. The next day, the War Department sent Major General Daniel Harvey Hill to help Pickett in his department. It didn't ease Pickett's mind at all. The Virginian collapsed on May 10th from all the mental and physical exhaustion as a result of anxiety over the approaching Federals and running around Petersburg rounding up civilians to protect the city. He was confined to his room. Through deception and mustering as many troops as possible, he was able to delay the approaching Federals enough to get substantial reinforcements to the city, but it came at a serious cost to his health. With Beauregard at Petersburg and able to take command, Pickett traveled to Hanover Junction north of Richmond and joined his old division at that location on May 19, 1864.